Hello, hello. I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is
Render the Darkness.
Today we are going to be discussing Timothy Treadwell, aka Grizzly Man.
Ooh, Grizzly Man.
Fact for this episode is that the human heart beats an average of 100,000 times per day, and a healthy heart pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood through your body each day.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. If that's incorrect, I'm sure some of our nurse and doctor listeners, if we have any, will let me know that that's not correct. But I did fact check that one.
Okay.
All right. Before we get into the case, I know it was a couple cases back, but I just wanted to add some new information that I was given by a listener concerning Robert Stroud, aka the Birdman, who we discussed in the Alcatraz Part 1 and 2 episodes. I believe in Part 1, you, Fallon, had asked or wondered what caused the president to change his sentence from death to life in prison.
Yeah.
So a listener was kind enough to send us the information with the answer of that. From what I understand, it was changed because of Robert Stroud's mother, who knew the president's wife through her social circle. So, from what they said, the president's wife entered his bedroom where he was laying sick in bed with a paper for him to sign, which would change the sentence from which the president did in turn sign. So that's how.
So the president's wife brought a paper to him while he was laying in bed dying.
Yes.
Getting him to change his sentence.
That is what I understand.
Huh.
Hey, it pays to have friends, man.
Yeah.
Hey, any of my friends that have some connections,
again, I'm just.
I might ask a favor every now and then. That's all I'm saying. But I thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit of information, so I wanted to just go ahead and add that in for anybody that listened to that case and may have also been curious why his sentence was changed.
Coolio.
So, on to the story of Timothy Treadwell. Tragically, there are actually 2 victims in this episode, but the path to getting to the details of the horrifically tragic day that we'll be discussing in this story is mostly centered around Timothy and his studies. The 2 victims are Timothy Treadwell and Amy Huguenard. I will talk more about Amy a little later, but for now, let's talk about Timothy.
All right.
Born Timothy William Dexter on April 29th, 1957 in Mineola, Long Island, New York, to Carol Ann and Val Dexter. Timothy was one of 5 children. He was said to be an animal lover from a very young age. He even at one point owned a squirrel named Willie.
Oh, squirrel.
He was the star diver of his swim team at, and I may say this wrong, if I do, I'm sorry, Connetquot, Connetquot High School, located in Bohemia, New York. After high school, his swimming and diving skills opened the door to scholarships, which he used to attend Bradley University. But at the time, what he really wanted to pursue was acting. I read that he actually ended up auditioning for the role of Woody Boyd in the show Cheers, but as anyone who has ever seen that show can tell you, the part would go to Woody Harrelson instead.
Oh, yep.
According to Timothy's father and later Timothy himself, this is kind of what sent him down a bit of a spiral, and this is around the time that Timothy would change his name from Dexter to Treadwell, which I read was a name from his mother's side that he'd actually used off and on throughout his life.
Okay.
He also at this time developed an alcohol problem, which would ultimately progress into a drug addiction.
Ooh.
In the late 1980s, he would barely survive a heroin overdose.
Dang.
if I piece the timeline together correctly, either sometime while he was still using drugs or shortly after the near fatal overdose, he had gone to Alaska under the encouragement of a friend. Either way, he went to Alaska, and this is where he claims to have had a wild bear encounter.
Ooh.
And this is what ended up leading to what Treadwell referred to as his love for the animal, while others might argue that it really triggered more of an obsession for the animal. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that when he went to Alaska, while he was still using, maybe around the same time he had his overdose, because later on Timothy would actually credit the bears as what got him sober.
Okay.
So I would go out on a limb and say he was probably still on drugs at the time that he actually had the encounter.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
This encounter is also what started a 13-year-long expedition to learn everything he could about the animals, as well as doing everything he could in his mind to protect them at all costs.
Awesome.
It's also what sparked the belief in his mind that he had a spiritual connection with the bears, that they were somehow spiritually intertwined.
That's how I feel about sloths.
That is your spirit animal.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's the same.
I love sloths.
He thought he had an actual spirit connection with the animals. You relate to a sloth because they're sleepy.
I like sloths. They're just so good.
This is when it said that he had started spending his winters in California and his summers in Alaska. He started doing his studies at the, and I hope I say this right, I have it written down how I thought the lady said it on my translator thing. Katmai Coast. Google that. It's either Katmai Coast or Katmai Coast, but the one that I Googled said Katmai Coast. Katmai. What was it? Katmai. Okay, at the Katmai Coast. On a spot he called the Grizzly Sanctuary in an area in Hallow Bay called the Big Green. Thank you for looking that up.
Hey, no problem.
And I know we've done it before, but I'm going to do it again since I just got such a wonderful segue to it with my, yet again, mispronunciation. We try really hard to not mispronounce the things that we're saying. I have no excuse for the times that we have mispronounced the things that we've said, or at least on my part.
I'm just really bad at it.
Yeah, we're just, we write it down and we listen, but by the time we actually get in here to record, we've forgotten the translation of what it was as far as the wording. We have it written down, but we can't always, we're from Arkansas. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. I can say that. I apologize. It's never intended to offend anyone, or we're never doing it intentionally. And we will do our best to pronounce things correctly. And we will try our best to improve on learning to pronounce them correctly before we start recording, so we can skip the part where we have to Google the words. But anyway, back to the case. That was my soapbox for this episode. As I was saying, he started his studies at the Katmai Coast in a spot he called the Grizzly Sanctuary in an area an area of Hallow Bay called the Big Green. This was an area that Treadwell knew would almost guarantee a bear encounter. In fact, he would see a lot of the same bears in this area, naming each one.
Oh, each one got a name.
Yeah, he became very familiar with this particular area.
I hope one was Yogi and one was Boo Boo.
I didn't see any Yogis or Boo Boos. He genuinely believed that over time he could build a bonded and trusted relationship with the bears. And so because of this, he would often get extremely close to the animals. Sometimes he was even able to make direct contact by touching them or playing with them, and he's even recorded himself interacting with a bear cub as well.
That's a very risky move.
He made some risky moves. He would move to a different area of the park when it got later into the season. He would move from Hallow Bay to Kaflia Bay. The area he would camp was located right at intersecting bear trails, and he would refer to this area as Grizzly Maze because of the thick brush that surrounded it. He recorded over 100 hours of footage of the bears and him attempting to interact with the bears, as well as countless pictures he took.
That's cool.
Most of the time he was alone when he went to observe and study bears, but I do know for at least the last 2 or 3 summers that he went out there, he did bring his girlfriend Amy. I mentioned her at the beginning of the episode, and I will mention her more later on. By the time the early 2000s rolled around, Treadwell was starting to receive a lot of media attention. He even began branding himself as an environmental activist. Mm-mm. Treadwell and his then-girlfriend, Jewel Palavak, started and founded a nonprofit organization together called Grizzly People in 1998. The intention behind the organization was to protect bears and preserve their natural habitats as much as possible. He also co-wrote the book Among Grizzlies, Living with Wild Bears in Alaska in 1999, who he wrote with Palavak as well. I read that although they were only together from 1985 to 1988, they not only did they remain close friends afterwards, they also remained associates. Like, they continued to work together for that time forward.
Okay.
Like, they never stopped working together. And that was coming from Palavak herself.
Okay.
So
awesome.
He also appeared on the David Letterman Show, which is a late-night talk show. He also appeared on Dateline NBC, as well as being featured on the Discovery Channel.
I love the Discovery Channel.
He even went around to schools all over the United States to educate children about bears and their wilderness habitats.
Cool.
Like I said before, Treadwell really only camped near the Katmai coast in the areas I mentioned, the Hallow Bay and the Kaflia Bay. I'm going to say it both ways because I don't know which way is right. Which are the areas a lot of his footage and pictures were taken. He seemed to intentionally alternate between the two locations depending on when he thought the bears would be the most active.
That makes sense.
And despite him sticking to those specific areas, that didn't help him avoid conflict with the National Park Services or the NPS over the years.
Also makes sense.
The NPS were almost immediately concerned with Treadwell's practices within the park, even way back when he first started going in the late 80s. And those concerns only increased over the years that he continued to go back there. The NPS even had an extensive file they kept on Treadwell filled with complaints about him and complaints from him. It also included the warnings he had received from rangers and staff, as well as park violations of the rules and restrictions he had acquired over the years. Seemingly, Treadwell just simply refused to comply with the park's rules or really even basic bear safety. He had around 6 recorded violations. There was possibly more, but that's the only ones I could track down from 1994 to 2003. Some of those violations being improper food storage, harassment of wildlife as well as other guests and visitors, staying longer than the park's allotted 7 days, and ironically, since he had a violation for having conflicts with other people in the park, he had another violation in his file for guiding tourists around the park without having a tour guiding license.
So that's funny. I mean, it wouldn't have been funny if something happened, but
no, but
yeah.
Some other conflicts Treadwell and the NPS battled over was Treadwell's adamant refusal to carry any kind of firearm or bear repellent, or bear repellent, or even having any in his tent or his gear at all.
Now that's not.
He just absolutely refused. He also refused to put an electric fence up around his campsite, which would have also helped prevent bears from entering. He was even advised to use the electric fence not only by the NPS, but also by Charlie Russell. Charlie Russell was a naturalist out of Kamchatka, Russia. He not only, I'm only going to say that once. He not only studied bears, but he also raised them and lived with them. And he and Treadwell actually worked together for more than 10 years. During that time, Russell would persistently encourage Treadwell to not only use the electric fence, but to also, at the very least, carry pepper spray on him, just in case.
Yeah.
But Treadwell absolutely refused to do either. He openly stated many times that he had been in a situation once where he had had to use bear mace, and he believed that it caused the bear a tremendous amount of pain, which was the opposite of what Treadwell would have ever wanted to do. So because of that, he said it caused him severe grief for a really long time afterwards. He really actually kind of seemed like he never got over it. And so from that point on, he just refused to use anything like that again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it probably hurt, like burned or whatever, but it didn't do a lot of damage, and that's gonna keep it from
He
eating ya.
wanted to cause zero pain to these creatures.
That's understandable,
Zero.
but I mean, if it's like coming at you or something.
Well, I mean, I touch on this later in the episode, but he also was very aware that he was intruding on their space. He was very aware of the risks that he was taking. So I think that also played a factor in his
Like
mindset of, right, like if something happens or a bear is coming at me, that's kind of on me because I'm the one that's invading their habitat, kind of a mindset.
Understandable, because I kind of agree with that situation. Okay.
There seems to be, or has been, a lot of debate over the years about what Treadwell's mission actually was and how he was going about it. I personally watched several of his videos, and yes, he did seem to have an innate ability to engage with the bears, especially since they were technically wild bears, and he also seemed to have a genuine love and passion for the animals. But he also had a certain, albeit unintentional, he had a certain level of disruption to the natural flow or order of nature, if you will.
Okay.
He would interrupt the bears by getting super close to them while they were in the water fishing.
Uh-oh.
Or while a mama bear was interacting with her cubs.
Uh-oh.
He just had disregard for whatever activities the bears were participating in when he would try to engage sometimes. Yeah. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Invading their personal space.
And I get that he thought he had that deep connection with them, and that because he studied and engaged primarily in the same area around the same bears he was familiar with, and some of them may even have become adjusted to him and kind of comfortable with his presence. But at the end of the day, he was something unnatural, making himself present in their natural habitats.
Right.
And he knew that. Like I said a minute ago, he knew that.
Yeah.
I will say, though, these bears, or most of the bears, were extremely tolerant and accepting of Treadwell's presence. So I can see why over time he would become more and more comfortable with his interactions with them. He thought he understood them, and they understood him, and to some degree, that, if you watch his videos, that seemingly was kind of true.
Okay.
This leads us into talking about the day of the incident. But before we do that, let's talk about Amy Lynn Huguenard, Treadwell's girlfriend. She was born on October 23rd, 1965 in Buffalo, New York, to parents Marilyn Huguenard and John Huguenard. She has two sisters by the name of Kathleen Stowell and Patricia Huguenard. She also has a brother named Jim. She graduated from Valparaiso High School in 1996. She graduated with distinction from the University of Colorado, located in Boulder, where she graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Molecular Cellular Development Biology.
Wow.
And after that, she went to the University of Alabama Birmingham School of Medicine, where she received an advanced degree. So, super smart.
Yeah, sounds like it.
At the time of her passing, she was working as a physician's assistant in Los Angeles at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. That was kind of a newer job for her at the time. And she was also known as being a wilderness enthusiast and a huge supporter of grizzly bears as well as harp seals. In fact, that's kind of what led her to meeting Treadwell in the first place. Okay. He was hosting a presentation about grizzly bears in Boulder at the time that they met.
Okay.
They were together for 3 years prior to the incident, and she was only 37 at the time of her death.
Oh.
So This particular trip, or I really should say stay, was a little different than the rest. Treadwell had already made his typical summer trip.
Okay.
During that trip, Treadwell and Amy hadn't seen. There's a specific bear that they kind of watched kind of grow from a cub to, older. They usually seen her every year when he would do his trips. They called her Downy. Anyway, they didn't see her that summer, so that kind of had them a little bit worried about, just her safety and where she was.
Yeah.
So they were supposed to catch a connecting flight back to California out of Kodiak on September 26, 2003. But when they arrived at the airport, there was an issue with Treadwell's ticket. I believe that they had made some kind of an adjustment to the price of his return ticket. And so that's kind of when Treadwell convinced Amy to just go back to the park for one more week, not only to get the ticket sorted out, but also because he just preferred to be around the bears, and it might give him an opportunity to try and see Downy.
Yeah, okay.
So, and like I said, he just would rather be amongst the bears than people, so if he had to stay longer than he intended to, he'd rather do it back out at a campsite than in the city.
You're right.
So he convinced Amy that they should just go back out to their campsite for another week. The plan was that they would go back to their previous campsite and stay from the 29th of September to October 6th, 2003. Choosing to go back and stay an additional week so late in the season came with some major dangers. Treadwell himself even acknowledged that most of the bears that were in the area that he was the most familiar with were most likely already in hibernation. I think I read one of the words they used for that was tortor, something like that, but it means hibernation, so I'm just going to stick with the word I know how to pronounce.
There you go.
So that also meant that a lot of the bears that they would come in contact with would be bears that neither of them knew. They weren't familiar with them at all because they were bears that were migrating over from the other areas of the parks that he had never stayed or studied. So he never came in contact with any of them, and they had never come in contact with him either.
Oh, that's not good.
It also meant that since they were so close to hibernation, the bears who were coming into the area would be desperately seeking to fill their bellies with as much meat and fat as possible in preparation. Unfortunately, that late in the season, and especially in that particular area, and for some reason this particular year, food seemingly was very scarce, which in turn was causing the bears to become more and more aggressive. Another dangerous element added to the specific time of year they chose to stay this extra week was the location. Their campsite was set up near Kaflia Bay. Remember the bear maze I talked about?
Yep.
And Kaflia Lake. So not only were they camped at an intersection of bear trails, but they were also camped right next to the water source the bears were using for a food source.
Oh, no.
So these factors, coupled with the fact that Treadwell refused to use anything that could protect them from the bears, no spray or deterrent or no electric fence, is set for an extremely unsafe situation.
I wonder why he didn't, at least use a horn.
I have no
idea.
idea.
An air horn.
I have no idea. Since bears from the other part of the park were migrating over, not only did they not expect Amy and Timothy or their campsite, but the Grizzly Maze they were camping fairly close to didn't really allow any advantages for the couple with the bears as far as eyesight. Meaning that it wasn't an open location in certain parts, so if a bear did run into them or their sight, there wasn't really enough time for a bear to adjust to their presence and to be able to determine if they were friend, foe, or food.
Oh, okay.
Once they got back to their site and set back up, Treadwell began doing what Treadwell always did, and he began filming and recording bear activity. In fact, just a few mere hours before the attack, Treadwell was recording a bear diving in the lake trying to get some salmon.
Oh, I bet that was cool.
I don't know, because there are some speculations I read that this may have been the very bear that...
Oh.
Yeah. But this was clearly a bear that Treadwell was not familiar with, and he even stated during the filming that he didn't really feel comfortable around this particular bear.
Okay.
So the last known contact that Treadwell and Amy had outside of their campsite was on Sunday, October 5th, 2003, around noon. They used the satellite phone to call and let an associate, and I read that associate was actually Jewel Palavak.
Okay.
They were calling to update and let her know that so far they had a smooth stay and there weren't any problems with any of the bears at this point. I also read in another source that they also let her know that they had seen Downy as well and that she was fine, but I don't know about that part. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just something that I read, so in case that is true, I added it in. They were set to be picked up the next day, October 6, 2003, by a Kodiak air taxi from a company called Andrew Airways. Pilot Willie Fulton arrived to pick up the couple, but the only thing he found at the campsite was that the site was in complete disarray and there was a bear. So Fulton immediately contacted park rangers, who immediately contacted the Alaska State Police to help with the situation, and they dispatched troopers immediately. I will go ahead and give a little bit of a trigger warning here. I don't go into graphic detail per se, but there are mention of some things that may be triggering to some, so please feel free to skip this next part if talking about details of someone passing is something that potentially upsets you in any way. Upon arriving at the campsite, park personnel and the troopers who arrived shortly after the rangers, they quickly found human remains.
Oh, no.
Treadwell was the first to be discovered. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but given that only parts of him were immediately discovered, it was quickly obvious what tragic events had taken place. Treadwell had been dismembered and partially eaten by a bear. Sadly, Amy's remains would be located shortly after, buried in a mound of brush and soil. She too had partially been eaten by a bear.
So it buried her?
Yeah.
Oh.
I read that bears do that.
Yeah.
And I also read that sometimes, and this is not anything to the case, this is just bare facts that I read, that sometimes they don't always necessarily kill their prey.
Yeah, I was going to say I've heard that too, that they'll just wound them to where they can't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, it buried her. Or tried to hide her, I guess. But I mentioned before that Fulton, the pilot, had seen a bear at the campsite. When the rangers and troopers were investigating what had now become a crime scene, they encountered a large and aggressive male bear. They had no choice but to shoot it. Mm-hmm. Not long after that, they would have to shoot an adolescent bear who, as I read, actually attempted to charge the rangers. So, yet again, leaving them with no choice but to shoot it. The adult bear was tagged, but I couldn't find anything that said if the youngest bear was tagged or not. And I think that the adult bear was tagged as Bear 141.
Okay.
But while the rangers and troopers were dismantling the tents, which there were 2 tents, it became pretty clear pretty quick that one of the tents were being used kind of for storage of their gear and food and equipment, and the other tent was being shared by the couple. While collecting the couple's gear, the troopers came across a camera that actually seemed to be on, so they checked to see if it had been recording during the attack or if it had captured anything that might help. And although no video was captured, there was audio.
Oh, no.
There was about 6 minutes or so of audio where you can clearly hear Treadwell being brutally attacked. I don't know if the audio is actually available. I know that you can find sites that claim to have the actual audio from the attack, but I also read that Jewel Palavak, who obtained the recording after the incident, she locked it away safely, never to be heard. But either way, even if it was available, I wouldn't include it in the episode.
Yeah, no.
I just feel like that would be way too disrespectful and in poor taste.
Yeah.
And as we touched on earlier, despite some of our mispronunciations in some of our previous episodes and this one of our primary focuses in these are always to be as respectful as possible to any of the victims or persons involved, as well as their family and friends in whatever we're discussing, which is why in a lot of these episodes too, you will hear us say, I'm not going to go into great detail about that. That's why we leave so much of the harsher details out of the episode. Or at least that's why I do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's actually a couple theories as to why there's only audio captured. One is that maybe the camera was in one of their gear bags, or that maybe it was nighttime. And another theory was that the lens cap was still on, which kind of is an interesting theory because that might mean that maybe the couple was preparing, or at least Treadwell was preparing to film one last time before leaving when the attack happened.
Yeah.
But either way, I personally feel like the audio existing is heartbreaking enough, so thank goodness there wasn't video footage of it too.
I couldn't imagine. Oh.
It would seem, though, that the audio stops recording before Amy's attack, so only Treadwell's attack was captured. But Amy can be heard on the tape as well, trying to help Treadwell the best she could for their situation. What I will say is captured on the audio before running out of tape was Treadwell's attack, the bear retreating after you hear Amy telling Treadwell to play dead, and the bear returning.
Mm.
You can also hear that it was heavily raining at the time of the attack. Some more findings were that the couple were in compliance with the park regulations for the most part, minus a couple food items that they had in the tent where they were sharing that weren't in proper food containers.
Oh.
I think I read it was some kind of like a sausage link and cheese and a bag of chips.
Uh-oh.
Which I also read may have played a part in what caused the bear to venture to their campsite in the first place. But I will also say that they did have other food containers that were properly stored, that the rangers and troopers found kind of scattered throughout the crime scene. But none of the food itself had been disturbed by any animals, from what I read. They also found Treadwell and Amy's journals. It appears that in one of Treadwell's last entries, he seemed to be talking about how in fear of the bears that they were encountering on this trip, Amy seemed to be, and it kind of matched the insinuation of one of Amy's last journal entries, which is where she was talking about how much she just wanted to leave.
Oh, wow.
They were able to autopsy the adult bear, or I think they refer to it as necropsy. And this showed that the bear was approximately 28 years of age and in relatively good health. It also resulted in the discovery of human remains in the bear's stomach.
Ooh.
So this was the bear that attacked them.
Okay.
Again, I'm not going to go into details as to what exact human remains were found. The younger bear was not able to be necropsied because it actually had been eaten by other bears before they were able to get to it to perform it.
Oh my gosh.
The only thing that was really left of that bear was its head, which they used to determine its age, and their determination was that the bear was around 3 years old.
Wow.
Obviously, this was an all-around tragic event on all accounts in every way possible. Upon their deaths, Treadwell's belongings were released to Jewel Palahniuk, who would team up with director Werner Herzog to begin making a documentary about Treadwell's life and mission to teach people about the animals, the importance of their safety and preservation of their homes. The documentary was called Grizzly Man. They used a huge majority of Treadwell's own video footage, coupled with interviews from people who knew him, to make the documentary.
Okay.
I watched a piece of it. It's pretty interesting. That can be found on the Discover channel, and it was released in 2005. On August 1st, 2008, Jewel Palahniuk released a docuseries or a miniseries called Diary of the Grizzly Man, which includes more footage of Treadwell's work, along with a narrator reading inserts from Treadwell's personal diary. There ended up only being 3 episodes of that one.
Okay.
Another docuseries was released on August 29th, 2008, and this one was an 8-episode series, and it was titled The Grizzly Man Diaries. This one contains video footage, pictures Treadwell had taken over the years, and some more of his personal diary entries. I believe both of these series can be found on the Animal Planet channel.
So were both of those from...
Jewel Palahniuk?
Yeah.
No, the last one was not done by her.
So did she give him or give them the...
I would assume they would have to have her permission to to release at least the diary entries, if nothing else.
Okay. That's what made me think it was possibly her because of that, but...
No, that one was not done by her. That
Okay.
was done by... I read the company, but I didn't add it, and I should have. Timothy and Amy's tragic deaths also sparked some more already pretty heavy debate about the safety and smartness of Treadwell's studies and work. Many people kind of began lashing out at Timothy for not only being the cause of his and Amy's death, but also two bears who would have otherwise continued living safe lives in the confinement of the park. Their attack was the first known attack in that park, which at the time had an 85-year history.
Wow.
Now, for my 2 cents that absolutely no one asked for.
I asked for it.
Oh, I'm going to give it to you.
All right.
I don't want to say what he was doing didn't have benefits, because it most certainly did. Okay. It paved the way for other people to be interested in wildlife advocacy and the safety of preservation and of the beautiful animals and their habitats. And he started that foundation with Jewel, which also brought awareness. And he traveled around speaking about the bears, which brought awareness. And he did, in a way, kind of showcase that it was potentially possible to understand these animals enough that the bears could potentially become adjusted to human presence. I mean, there's footage of Treadwell calling one of the bears by one of the names he had given him, and that bear responds. So, not to mention the absolutely incredible, priceless pictures that he took of these animals over the years that have been featured many times in many magazines and used in multiple ways to bring awareness. I will also not deny the fact that this man undoubtedly had an immense passion and love for the animals, because he did. Okay. I do, however, think that the more comfortable and confident that he became, the more relaxed and lazy he became with his approach. He started throwing literally any and all safety precautions out the window because he truly believed that he didn't need them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 4 lives were taken because of it. I will say, though, to his credit, as I said earlier, he did say over and over again that he was aware of the risk he was taking doing what he was doing. He even anticipated at one point on one of the talk shows he was on, that he would most likely be killed by a bear one day. He also adamantly insisted that no one try to do what he was doing, so he was fully aware of how dangerous it was. I also think he wasn't doing what he was doing with the particular bears he was focusing on. Like, I don't think he was accomplishing what he was trying to accomplish with these particular bears. I say that because it's not like he was out in the wild trying to domesticate bears in uncharted, unprotected areas. Like, he was in a national park. Like, these bears were already protected within the confines of the park.
Right.
Which makes it kind of seem maybe part of the reason he was doing it was so maybe for like the thrill or something more so to benefit himself than the bear. I don't want to say that it was selfish what he was doing, but I can see in some ways how it could be perceived that he was definitely making some selfish moves. Especially when it comes to the events of the tragic day. I mean, he obviously got something emotional from working with these animals, and I completely understand that the reason he chose that particular area is because that's where he had his first encounter. But as for the preservation or of their habitat or their safety, these particular bears, they kind of already had all that.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Do you think he was doing the right thing, or do you think he was going about what he was doing the right way?
I'm going to have to say this. Okay, I mean, I can understand, his fascination with the bears and wanting to be able to get, closer with them per se, but I do think that he was being, don't come at me for this is just my opinion, I do think he was being a little selfish in the simple fact that I'm sure he knew that if he did get attacked, they were going to go after the bear that attacked him.
They were going to.
Yeah, they were going to kill that bear. Okay, so I'm sure he knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he didn't have any kind of protection,
Well, and the fact that he was now involving other people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
He was doing,
you know,
as
like,
well.
no protection for himself, but yet there's no protection for his girlfriend.
Now, granted, I will also say that, despite what I said about the journal entries about, maybe her feeling scared of those particular bears and whatnot, but, I did read as well that Amy was also noted as saying that she too understood the risks of what they were doing.
Yeah, but
so I don't know if she supported him in his decision to not have those items,
or
I was
gonna say that.
I don't know. I didn't see anywhere that said she did or didn't, but I did read that she did vocalize that she was also aware of the risk that they were taking.
Oh, I'm sure she did, but I mean, like I said, them doing that, they had to have known that if they did get attacked, those bears, whatever bear killed them, was gonna die.
Absolutely.
And that to me is, like I said, don't come at me, pretty selfish.
I agree.
Because
I definitely agree his level of carelessness definitely had a level of selfishness behind what he was doing. It's almost like the more comfortable he got, the more inviting of potential danger he had become, which is what made me say what I said about maybe he got some kind of a thrill out of it. How when you start doing something for that little bit of an adrenaline rush that you get, and then, you've done it so many times, you're no longer getting that same rush, so you kind of have to crank it up a little bit and intensify the danger of what you're doing so that you can continue to get that little bit of a rush out of it. And again, I'm not saying that that's solely what he was doing. I do think that he did have in his mind good intentions.
Yeah. I'm not saying he didn't. Yeah,
but I also do think that there was some degree of selfishness.
Yeah, he definitely went about it all wrong. Completely wrong. I mean, like I said, he should have, if he was going to go in there and do that, he should have at least had some sort of protection. Nothing that's going to, like, kill the bear. Like the air horn, I mean, I know he didn't want to use mace because it's going to burn. Right. But that's the worst case scenario. It's going to burn.
Well, also, too, and I understand his reasoning as far as he doesn't want to hurt the bears and whatnot, but, neither do the park rangers.
Right.
Neither do the people who are, tasked with protecting these animals as well. And, even Charlie Russell, who I mentioned earlier, who also recommended the electric fence and the pepper spray, who raised these animals and lived with these animals. He doesn't want to harm them either. So I feel like they weren't going to encourage him to use anything that could cause any kind of long-term or extreme harm to the animals.
Right, yeah.
So if they're encouraging him to use those items, obviously they're not things that, I mean, bear mace is specifically made to scare a bear or to stun it enough that it'll retreat.
Right.
They don't go out of their way to make products to harm a bear.
Right.
In a protect yourself situation, I don't think. That's my opinion. Obviously, I don't want to take away from the fact that 2 human lives were lost.
Right, no.
But I also, again, like I said in the episode, I think it's sad because of the situation that he created, 2 bears living in the confinement of what was supposed to be a safe environment for them got put in a position where they lost their lives too.
And they were just looking for food. So, they were just doing what they naturally do.
It just seems like, as far as all 4 lives that were lost in this situation, it was a completely avoidable situation.
Yeah.
And I feel like he kind of broke his own rule there too by going back that extra week and staying later in the season than he would normally stay.
Yeah, completely different bears, completely different situation. Yeah, So again, don't come at us, just our opinion.
I just feel like anything that could go wrong in that situation went wrong in that situation, and unfortunately, it ended in very tragic results. So absolutely rest in peace to Timothy and Amy, and very tragic, and it's a heart-wrenching case.
It is.
But yeah. If anybody out there has opinions about the case or knows more about it than what I've mentioned here and would like to add to it or have your own opinions or anything like that, feel free to communicate, reach out, contact. But other than that, that was my case today. And thank you for participating and listening and spending your time with us.
Yes, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. It was good. It was sad, tragic, and just terrible.
It was very sad. So, this is Render the Darkness.
Bye.